If you don't hire the right people at the right time, it can really cost you. You're just too busy growing and you can't afford to hire the wrong people that are constantly battling with you maybe or helping you build your dream. That's one of the top issues that I see entrepreneurs make, is not really taking seriously the first hires.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast. Now, growing your business doesn't have to come at the cost of burnout or chaos. In this episode, Lynn Talbott, a successful founder who scaled and sold her 7-figure bookkeeping firm, shares the most common pitfalls leaders make when scaling and how to avoid them. From hiring too quickly to holding on to work that should be delegated, Lynn offers clear, hard-earned insights to help business owners grow sustainably and build a company they actually enjoy running. Lynn, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Harley.
That's our pleasure. So, Lynn, tell us a little bit more about your background. Tell us about your bookkeeping firm that you started and kind of how you got through that and what brought you to what you're doing today.
Yes, so I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur, got a human resources degree and went out and did the corporate world like most people do when they graduate from college. And I was in HR. I really liked it, but I knew I always wanted to own my own business. So when I started my business, I called it HR, Business Solutions, because I was going to go around and help people with their back end office, doing human resources and maybe some bookkeeping. I started doing HR, found out quickly that entrepreneurs and startups don't really want to talk to people about HR. They have their own way of doing things and they like to feel like, hey, I can make those HR decisions. I don't need somebody telling me what to do. So quickly, my HR Business Solutions company became more of a bookkeeping company simply because that was the need. And that's what we do as startups, shift when we have to, right?
I got that good pivot there.
Yeah. So over the years, I've helped, hundreds of entrepreneurs at the startup level with their messy HR and bookkeeping and just kind of anything in the back office, and doing things like helping them hire or helping them figure out job descriptions or creating handbooks, just creating some structure around when they're ready to scale. Because as your listeners know, when you start to scale, you get pulled in a lot of directions. And I find the entrepreneur can get a little bit caught up in, I can do everything. I wear all the hats. I make all the decisions. And, there's something about being an entrepreneur that makes you feel like you can do everything, that you're just Superman and you have all the answers. But what happens is, what I would find with a lot of the entrepreneurs is they would go and make their own decisions. And then a couple years down the road, find, wow, I didn't do the right hire, or I didn't set up my back office right. And now I'm scaling. And here I am trying to do 1,000 things, but I might not have the right people in place.
Yeah, I think we've all seen and experienced that. And one thing that you've mentioned before is how the first few hires, maybe the first 5 hires, can really make or break a business. What makes those early decisions so high stakes?
Yeah. So your early hires, like you said, can really just make or break. They set the tone for the culture, for the pace, for how your business is going to go. And I always say first 4 hires are like your cornerstone. Just think of them as your 4 cornerstones, your building blocks. And if you think of it that way, what do you need? What does your company need so that you can delegate and so that you can be successful and scale? That involves thinking 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, or 10 hires down the road. We all scale at different times. But I've found that, and I've seen it again and again, if you don't hire the right people at the right time, it can really cost you. You're just too busy growing and you can't afford to hire the wrong people that maybe need to be babysat or that are constantly battling with you maybe, or, helping you build your dream. So that's one of the top issues that I see entrepreneurs make, is not really taking seriously the first hires. I think they might like hire the first one quickly. They'll say, oh, I need this. I need somebody to do data entry, or I need somebody to do marketing, or I need somebody to do this. And they just hire that person, and maybe they have the skills at that moment, but long term, maybe they can't pivot and grow with your company as your company grows.
Yeah, this could be really impactful. And you mentioned, rushing into that first hire because you've got like this pain point, let's say marketing, right? You get the marketing person. What are some tips or strategies that you'd share with leaders to maybe slow it down a little bit and make sure that hire is strategic and the right one?
Yes, and one of the mottos I use is hire slow, fire fast. Your listeners have probably heard that. And I remember when I moved from corporate HR to owning my own business, I too thought I knew everything and I could hire whoever I wanted. Even with my skills and background and a degree in HR, I still did not heed that advice. Would find somebody who was outgoing and they had great skills. I would do, a quick interview and off they go. And come to find out later on, it wasn't really a culture fit. They were battling and things like that. But one of the things is to look at that culture fit. Every startup has a culture, right? And that culture's you, the entrepreneur. It's everything that you stand for and what you want your company, your product, your service to be. And so you have to look at somebody and say, is this going to fit my culture or am I going to battle with them forever? Because toxic hires can just poison your company and bring your company down so quickly that I think entrepreneurs don't realize that they may realize it too late that they've already poisoned your company and then you hired them too quickly. So hire slow, but fire fast.
What are some tools or ways and kind of interview strategies you recommend people employ to make sure that there's a good culture match? I mean, you know, we know about technical skills evaluating. We can do evaluations there. Are there particular evaluations for culture or questions or other methodologies that you suggest people employ to make sure that those hires do have a good culture fit?
Yeah, and that's a great question. It's hard to discern that if you haven't defined your culture, your mission, your vision. And I'm assuming as an entrepreneur or startups, before they're hiring people, your listeners have done that. They have their vision and mission, and they're going to remember that when they're interviewing and hiring. Is this person, able to meet those goals that I have set out? Or is this person able to, meld into the culture that I want? But one of the things that I see with interviewing, and this is typical of entrepreneurs, is that, hey, I've got a good sense of people and I've got a good feeling. I can just go to wing it. I can talk to people on the phone. We hire people remote all the time. We can just get on Google Meets or Zoom. And I think I've got a pretty good feel for people, Lynn. I can just hire people. And you use that gut instinct. That there's time to use that. And the gut instinct is always good. But if you're just winging it, you just get them on there and you just start yakking and talking, you're going to create what we call in human resources the halo effect. And the halo effect is maybe you've looked at their resume or you've talked to them in some other situation and you're like, okay, this is the person I want to hire. So instead of vetting them, you're just trying to convince them to come work for you. You're like, this person's great. You put a little halo on them. And really, no matter what they say, you start pivoting around, even though they might not have, maybe they have the technical skills, but maybe they don't have the culture fit, the soft skills, or maybe they can't grow with you. So that halo effect is real. And it's happened to me and it can happen to anybody when you've got somebody in front of you and you're like, I really want to hire this person. You're not interviewing them. You're just convincing them to come work for you. And I think that is one of the major problems that I see. And it can just come to bite you later on. Now, you might have a good instinct and it might work out. And of course, we would hope that that would be the case.
And this kind of goes back to what you mentioned before of like how entrepreneurs many times think, oh, they can do everything themselves. That is true. They can. Whether they should or that's in the best interest of the business is another thing. So is there maybe a time and place where for certain roles, it's best to just delegate the hiring to people who maybe are professional, talent search coordinators or someone who's very familiar with getting people for that type of role?
Yes, and it depends on, I think, who you're hiring. If you need an operations manager to run everything, yes, you might want to go outside to find somebody for that. If you just need marketing person, they are everywhere. We know that. Or a virtual assistant, you can find that probably on your own. I don't necessarily think people need a professional person to go out. And it does depend on the hire to help you hire. I just think that if you had some guidelines before you hire and during your hiring process, you're interviewing, and then post hire, doing that evaluation. I like to think of it as, the steps, the progress that people need to make when they're hiring somebody is to define what that job is. What exactly are you trying to fill? Are you trying just marketing, or would you like somebody to do marketing, manage your CRM, and do some back end office work and maybe some sales? You're going to look for those, hard skills as well. When I say things like job description to startup person or an entrepreneur, they're just like, yeah, I left corporate world to get away from people like you who want me to have a big HR department. And I get that because human resources has really changed over the years, and it can be stifling when you hear somebody say you need some structure around your human resources, because I find your listeners may agree with this too. A lot of entrepreneurs don't like a lot of structure, right? They want to kind of free do it, Lynn. I'm just going to go and hire people. And if they don't work out, I'm going to let go. I have good judgment. I'm on this. I can handle this. But, even if you do little job descriptions, they can be quick. Of course, ChatGPT can help you with that as well. Just even if it's a task list and then turn that into a job description, it will help you focus on exactly what you're hiring for. And I guarantee when you're doing that task list, you'll think of some other things that that person could do. And then you want to hire the person that can either be in that job or grow into that job, because not everybody's going to come out of the starting gate ready to do your perfect job description.
Now, you've worked with teams that have skipped defining roles and having good job descriptions. What are some of the problems that show up when the expectations are not clear from the start?
Well, I will often get called in as a fractional, human resources person to come in and talk to employees or a group of employees, maybe in a certain department, who are disgruntled. And you think, why are they disgruntled? But what happens is if they don't have clear roles, they sort of have free flow. And I know entrepreneurs like free flow. I like that as well. When you start to grow beyond 10 people, like say you have 20, that free flow can start to cause conflicts within different departments. And so what will happen is the departments will start, I don't know if competing with each other is the right way, but everyone starts competing for the owner's attention, right? Because they're like, oh, I need you over here, Lynn, I need you over here. And they start competing for your attention. And if you don't have the right people that have the leadership skills to step in and handle all that stuff, you're going to get pulled in all those directions. So if you hire people too fast, you may find that you have missed some of those leadership skills that you're going to need a year from now. Because if everyone's coming at you and no one is taking the load off of you, that's what I see the main problem happening is when you hire too fast, you don't define those roles, and then people don't feel like they can own that task or own that department or own that themselves. And when you grow really fast, you end up just spreading yourself too thin if those hires aren't, again, your cornerstone of your business, if they're not taking control of their area and really managing things.
Every day, your top performers are buried under emails, scheduling, and reporting, work that doesn't move the needle. The result? Frustration, burnout, and worst of all, lost revenue. That's why we created the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers, a simple, battle-tested framework to eliminate busy work and unlock your team's full potential. Inside, you'll get the exact steps top executives use to retain A players, boost productivity, and free up their team for high-impact work. Stop losing revenue. Go to workergenics.com/growthhub or check the episode notes to download the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers now. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it kind of leads into the next question I had that, you mentioned how entrepreneurs, enjoy some inflexibility. A lot of times when they hear HR, like, that's not what I got into doing this business for, right? So how should they think about culture as they are starting out and building a team, especially if they want to lead without becoming too corporate?
Yeah, and everybody's going to have their own opinion about this and their own, culture style. I've seen so many different culture styles, and so I can't always say that this is right or this is wrong. Every company is going to be unique, but the owner, the business owner, definitely sets that tone. And it comes down to, what do you stand for as an entrepreneur, and how do you disseminate that to others? in the company. There's one company I worked for I still do some for about 10 years. They were in the incubator with me when I was being incubated with my business. I love the owner. He was an ex-banker, so he had a good business mind, but he wanted his employees to read. And so he asked his employees, he gave different books that he felt defined his culture and kind of brought people together. And he would give them, I think they got like a half day PTO when they finished the book and talked about it. So they would have book reports and not book reports, but like, book meetings at lunch, and people would get a lot of PTO time off. And this was like wonderfully was this was well received by the employees. They loved it. And often he would hand the book to me to read and I could get to know his culture. So that's just an interesting way to do something. Not everybody's going to like that, but for him, it worked. And his employees latched onto that. They would read the books together, talk about it, and it made for easy conversations in the workplace. If something wasn't going the way it should, it made it easy for people to talk and communicate about it. I found that it opened up the channels of communication up and down.
That's a great example for strong culture. I love that. Now, if someone's got the culture lined up, they're doing great activities like this with their team, what is the next step in terms of having a strong interview process? What does that look like to grow the business if you need results fast, but you don't want to run into some of those issues like, putting the halo on the employee that you're interviewing?
Right. So we talked a little bit about try not to wing it, try not to just go into the interview. And I had an interview sheet that I had because I had specific things when I hired a bookkeeper or I hired somebody for HR. I had specific things I wanted to ask them. And sure, it's very common for us to use behavioral type questions. And behavioral questions just say, past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior. So if you're asking, how did you handle this? How did you perform under these circumstances? Or, if it's a sales thing, tell me about your sales performance. Again, past behavior is hopefully will predict the future behavior. So if you're just asking, tell me about this or tell me about this. So when you ask those behavioral questions, it helps you and the client kind of hone in to those skills that you're looking for and the behaviors, because somebody can have the skill, but the way they describe how they behaved during that situation or performance that you asked them, that tells you the answer. Because if somebody says, we'll say, tell me about your last position, and they start off with, well, my boss was terrible and this and that. I mean, don't just skip over that. They're telling you how they're going to behave when they get to your company, and believe them. When they get to your company, they're going to be complaining about you.
Absolutely. Well, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which was, the red flags. What are some red flags to look for when you're desperate for help, you're interviewing people that you really should not ignore?
Yeah, so some of the red flags that I see personally is people are hiring. So I often would come in to an HR situation when the hire had not gone properly and they were asking me to help basically fire the person. How do we talk to them or put them on a plan for improvement, a performance improvement plan? And so to avoid that, you want to hire, correctly the first time. One, we talked about the halo effect. We talked about prepping for the interview. And the other thing is, this is very typical of startups. I would say 80% of the startups I work do this. They hire somebody very, very close to them. It's a lot of times their spouse. And if they're older, it might be their child. If it's a child, it may be their mother doing their books. And it may be their sister-in-law doing marketing because she's a stay-at-home mom, but I can teach her. What happens when you start with all this family, hiring family, is that's hard to put on a performance plan, right? They're going to be hard to work with later on. Now, you may have great relations with all of your family. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily the best employee, because just hiring somebody that that your neighbor, the sweet lady, I can teach her bookkeeping, right? That's what they would say. Well, I trust her, so I'll teach her bookkeeping. That turns into a disaster in the back end office because everything's in chaos. Just because they're nice and they're trustworthy does not mean they meet that skill set to be a bookkeeper or to do what it is that you want to do. We see a lot of that with the bookkeeping. I would say 90% of when I go into rescue startup for their bookkeeping, it's because a spouse or a child or a mother, somebody very close to them has been doing the bookkeeping, but didn't know what they were doing. They were maybe getting the bills paid, but when when it came to file the taxes, the books were a mess. So I would say try to stay away from hiring somebody just because you trust them and you like them and they're real close to you.
Good advice. So, another area of handing tasks off, and people often wonder about or have questions around that you might get this sometimes. What point does it really make sense for a founder to start handing off daily responsibilities to a right hand person, like an executive assistant or chief operations, something like that?
So I think you need to start delegating things like right away because when you hire people, you're going to, train them, get them on board, and then you really want to get them up to speed pretty quickly because you as the entrepreneur are going to end up with you're already working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, you're wearing all the hats, you're running around trying to do everything at the same time creating sales. Your job is to manage your company, go out and find the sales and not to handle all the back end office, but you want to make sure they're done correctly. And I think one of the biggest mistakes is we don't delegate as entrepreneurs. We tend to say, I can do it. It's just 10 minutes. I can work on Saturday and get that document out, or I can clean up the CRM on Sunday. And we forget that by the time Monday comes, we start to get too busy to do what needs to be done, with the company. But developing in leadership is really important. So if you have hired someone and you want them to step up and be operations manager, step up and be CFO, hey, just handle all the finances. I need you to pay the bills, go get the loans, do everything. But you need to develop in leadership. Are you hiring a leader that is taking on the task rather than just pushing the task back to you? So that's one part too. If you want your people to, you want to delegate to your employees and you don't want to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, then you have to delegate soon. And then you have to develop those leadership skills below you so that they can handle those tasks.
That's great advice. Well, as we wrap up here, Lynn, what would you say is your top advice for a business owner who realizes they've hired the wrong person? How do they recover that without damaging their momentum?
Yes. So I've had this happen to me. And really what I do, and I'm a really open person and honest, and really you just have to sit down and honestly talk to them. Hey, things aren't going great. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like there's something going on between us, or how are you doing? And have that honest conversation. If you have been able to talk to them in the past, this should be easy. If you're the kind of entrepreneur that doesn't like confrontation and you just want them gone, this is going to be a difficult task. But you can't let somebody hang on if they're not, you know, holding their weight and they're not fitting with your culture and they're not helping you grow your business. So again, hire slow, fire fast. You can just pull them in and say, I am so sorry. This is not working out. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going in a different direction. Whatever you want to say, and let them go. And as you're talking to them, you can have somebody else, if you want to, closing them out of all their emails and everything so that you can just make it a clean cut. So there are different, laws in different states about firing people. But if you do it quickly before it escalates into an issue, that is the best advice I have. Hire slow and fire fast.
Well, Lynn, you've shared some incredible strategies with our audience today. If people want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
Yes, well, you can find me at coachingbookkeepers.com, where we have a training circle where we coach bookkeepers to scale and sell their bookkeeping firms.
For those of you listening, if you got value from this episode, do one quick thing. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future strategies to help you scale smarter. And maybe you know a business owner or colleague who could use this. Share this episode with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a quick star rating. It helps us reach more leaders just like you. And again, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.